Make sure I didn't start without you. Okay, I believe we can begin now. Good evening, everyone. This is the Dania Beach City Commission virtual workshop on the Oak Hammock Tree Protection Overlay Ordinance. It is Tuesday, January 5th. It's 5:31 p.m. Call the roll, please.
Mayor James.
Here.
Vice Mayor Salvino.
Here.
Commissioner Davis.
Here.
Commissioner Llewellyn.
Here.
Commissioner Odman.
Yeah.
City Manager Garcia. I see you. City Attorney Ansbro.
Here.
Thank you.
Okay, I'm not sure if Tom or Eve wanted to kind of go back over everything or where we left off. I know we have a lot of comments, questions, papers that I have, and I know we all received. So, Tom?
Yes, we're willing to do whatever the commission directs us to do. You may recall we asked for the community to send in questions if they had them for the commission, the staff, or both. A number of people have done that. They're pretty extensive. We forwarded all of those to you. I don't know if you've each had an opportunity to read them, how you wish to address them. But it's really about, ultimately, this is about how you as a commission wish to proceed, but taking into account what the people who are affected by this are saying about it. So you've got, as we all know, we've done this, I think, 4 occasions. So we've spent a great deal of time on this because the commission is intent on doing the right thing for the people. So we look for you for direction, how you wish to move. We can read the questions. You can answer them. There's a lot of questions. We want it to be manageable, so we look to you for direction.
Okay. I know that of a lot of the questions that were received, there were a lot of answers that were sent back to those residents. So I really wanted to give the opportunity to residents who have not had a chance to ask a different type of question, because I don't want to have a lot of repeated questions, a lot of the same issues. This is not a meeting to say if you are for or against the ordinance. This is just sort of a meeting to clarify anything. I think that we've heard hours of whether or not you are in support of the ordinance or not. But I just wanted to make sure that as a commission, we are answering everything and everyone is clear, excuse me, everyone is clear on any of the topics or the ordinance or the laws or, you know, the little fine red lines of things that are happening. So, yes, Eve?
Hi, good evening, everyone, and Happy New Year. I just wanted to say the direction you had given was that most of the meeting today was supposed to be for you all to discuss. And then at the end, if they had any questions that hadn't been answered, to go ahead and try and answer those.
Okay.
And so we have tried to answer every single question that's come in. There was one that we haven't answered. It just came in a little while ago. And what we're going to do is it'll take some time to respond to that one because it's kind of detailed. And we'll send that out separately to him and to everyone so that they have the information.
Okay.
Mayor, we do have an overview from Ryan St. George, who's our consultant, a brief overview of a picture overhead of the area and some of the basic comments if you want to set the stage for everybody to be familiar with it. And we've met with everybody. I don't know if you wish to hear that or not, but we do have it ready to go.
I would like to hear that because I would like to see the overview of the site, because I did have questions on why we weren't including, if we were, because I saw some of the questions had asked why certain streets and not other streets, and I saw that the responses were because this is the last overlay hammock in the city, but then we also had conversations that they're actually, I think that's Shady Ridge or something like that. There are a lot of oaks in that area as well, and those are not included in this ordinance. That area is not included in that ordinance. So I would like to see the overview and photos and everything else.
Okay, Ryan, could you proceed with that, please? Ryan St. George is with Metric Engineering, whom we've used for years as our consultant on landscape and a number of other issues.
Yeah, I'm here, guys. Can you hear me okay?
Yes, we can hear you.
Okay, someone may need to load that for me, or I'm going to try and pull it up on my end, but I haven't shared screens in Ring Central yet.
Monica, can you assist?
Are you saying that you cannot share your screen?
Haven't done it yet. It might take me a minute. And I'm not familiar with Ring Central in a sharing context, but I'm almost there.
At the bottom,
Okay. No problem.
you click share. It should give you at the bottom to share screen.
All right, so just give me a minute to find the file in my folder here. I apologize for the delay. I wasn't expecting to have to pull this up, but hold on just a minute for me.
You're fine.
It's this one. Okay, I did find it. Let's see now. Bottom of the screen. Share. Screen one. Is everyone able to see a document entitled Ordinance Highlights and Commission Meeting Comment Responses?
Yes.
Okay, so this really was a summary I put together actually before the holiday, trying to extract key elements of this ordinance that are in many ways kind of getting lost in the wash. There's been a lot of wash, as you all know. We didn't want, for the purposes of deliberation for the commission, we didn't want some of these key pieces to get buried in all the discussion. Many of them have been up to date, but that's to this point. But that's also why we're having this workshop today, to clarify a number of elements, hopefully dispel some of the remaining misinformation, and continue moving forward as cleanly and clearly as possible. So I don't know if you want me to read these things off, or if you want to look at the aerial image real quickly. Any of these options works for me.
Ryan, if you could summarize the points, but then go to the map quickly.
Okay.
So we can see the particular area we're talking about, why it is unique.
No problem at all. So basically, it's important to lay out or remind everyone that the city already does have an existing tree preservation ordinance and an existing landscaping code that work in tandem to manage the city's vegetation on all fronts, whether it be new installations, existing stuff. And up to the point where the House bill had been enacted, it operated pretty well. There were always some outlier situations and some things that get missed, but it operated pretty darn well as an integrated set of two code sections for the city. So the ordinance, as everyone knows at this point, is intended to recognize how special this area is, and was prompted by some relatively significant mature specimen tree losses that the city's code would have otherwise said should not be removed. So that was the initial impetus for this entire ordinance. Everybody, I think, on the call and attending this meeting is probably very aware of that. The ordinance is intended, again, to recognize how unique this area is in the context of the city, and even extending outside the city into some of the surrounding municipalities in the county. As an ecological professional, it's my opinion at this point, and I'm not speaking on behalf of the city in the capacity of our consulting role, that this area, this oak hammock that is the discussion of all of these meetings, warrants additional consideration for long-term preservation and management, which is the second bullet here, basically. And the ordinance is intending to call out the fact that these tree hammock communities don't survive well if they're not managed in their entirety. If sections of them get carved out or holes get created in them, it weakens them synergistically to the point where they can start to crumble on their own, kind of a domino effect thing. For the purposes of maintaining this wonderful ecological feature, we're hoping that this new ordinance can help make sure that we don't get to the tipping point, or don't get to witness that domino effect. So for the purposes of visualizing, this is basically the city of Dania. The municipal boundaries are in yellow. They're kind of hard to see. I wasn't able to change the layering, but I added them for reference just so you could see. Mostly, I mean, this is the I-95 corridor. You might be able to see with my cursor. It's obviously heavy commercial. Everything up here is the FPL plant and Broward County's Pond Apple Slough, which is all of a wetland system. This is all wetland. Everything out west over here that looks green is the town of Davie. And most of that, from my experience working for Broward County, a lot of it is wetland and most of it is infested with exotics. This wonderful little area right here, which is the subject of our ordinance, and in red is the overall oak hammock tree community as visible from the aerial. In blue is a rough outline of the overlay area as it has been defined to date. There is a separation between the two from that big SCAR FPL easement, the two halves for sure, but there is additional oak canopy that does run up along 40th. However, this intact area that we've been talking about for months now is the area circled in blue. If you look at just the shade green in this area and compare it to all of the other areas around, the one takeaway that I was trying to show is that with the exception of that FPL easement SCAR running through the center, it is by far the largest and most intact of all of the green space areas, the tree community, tree areas within, I think it's about a 3 to 4 mile radius in all directions. And you've got to go out to up to Pond Apple Slough or out east to Westlake Park to find an area that's more vegetated with desirable native tree species. And those are wetland systems, which are protected under conservation easement. This is not protected by any sort of easement, but it's an upland system with upland trees like oaks and slash pines and all of the native forest trees that belong in South Florida, which is what makes this site special. So that is really all that I was trying to show. Hopefully I was able to zoom in enough for everybody to see. Then just working through a few other highlights here. Again, just to continue my point, there are other areas in the city that have oaks, but they don't even come close to the density or quality or intactness of this area. Many of them are named after oaks because they had oaks or have some oaks remaining, but they don't have anything resembling this level of quality, maturity, or intactness anymore. And then to go back to the purpose of the ordinance, we know it's to discourage improper use of the House bill to clear healthy trees and to promote integrated management of the tree resources that do remain from a very important safety focused perspective as well. Mismanagement of trees has an ability to create greater safety concerns than proper management, and that is the only point there. Another key element that's getting lost amongst a lot of the residents, the way this ordinance was written, and the way it was written, it was intended to have a much greater effect on redevelopment properties or properties going under extensive modification. Existing properties and existing single-family homeowners, unless they're trying to do something significant with their property, are not expected to really notice this ordinance. All it does is help the city guide them make wise tree-sensitive decisions, and that is really it. It's not how it's being perceived by many, though, and I think tonight's workshop will help clarify some of that. I've already mentioned the point about how weakening trees within these communities, or how losing trees within these communities weakens the surrounding forest, so I don't need to revisit that. We are hoping to maintain some degree of intactness of this community, of this tree community, by recognizing how special it is. To do that, we know in some cases, tree removals will be necessary. There will be sick trees, there will be diseased trees, there will be trees that are taken out using the House bill. It will happen. Our hope with the ordinance is that we establish a more consistent threshold for the minimum amount of vegetation that belongs on properties within this area, so that the intactness and the contiguity and the integrity of the overall community is maintained as much as possible to eliminate those domino effect weaknesses that are a huge long-term concern. In the existing condition, the current code will only require a property that has no trees to plant 3 small 12-foot trees. And that in this large single-family neighborhood is really going to be unnoticeable and have no positive effect. The ordinance, as written, is in a case where someone removes all of their trees, the replacement requirement or the minimum landscape requirement now becomes 6 16-foot trees, which are much larger, much more mature, and will develop canopies that can integrate with the surrounding vegetation much sooner, thereby eliminating those open voids or the weaknesses that a large-scale tree removal effort would create. And at that point, we're getting into questions and answers. So that was the introduction along with the aerial that I wanted to, I guess, present to the attendees for this workshop.
Ryan, if you could, I think it's worth recounting why the FP&L, we call that FP&L site, was first put in unbeknownst to you. I think it was put in because the neighborhood requested it. The city reacted to that, incorporated it. It was then removed subsequently when it was determined that there are very few trees in that swath, what you call the scar, aptly spoken, because all the invasive and exotics were taken out. There was a small group of trees left for the one gentleman who owns property there. But for the most part, that corridor for the FP&L easement is pretty much devoid of trees. And so it was at the city's request to then remove it, as you recall. And I think you supported that. You would have not even supported putting it in the first place if you'd been asked. You weren't, but it is currently not part of this protection ordinance.
Yes, Tom, that is the case. I was not part of the original effort to draw the boundary of the overlay area. I think that was based on, if I recall correctly, I think it was based on the petition request or something along those lines. At that time, I wouldn't have even guessed that the FPL property would have been included because it was at that time or prior to that time just covered in exotics along that eastern boundary. And the only desirable native trees were the 20 or so sitting on the south end where the existing house is. Given the fact that it's severely altered, encumbered by a utility easement that requires vegetation maintenance that's in strict conflict with the intent of the ordinance, and that there are a minimal amount of remaining desirable native trees except at the southern end, I wouldn't have thought it to be appropriate to put this property, this 10-acre property that has maybe a half acre of quality vegetation in amongst the rest of the ordinance. Now, I just lost my train of thought, but that was my logic behind this. It's an exotic seed source now because of all the removed vegetation. It's actually, ecologically speaking, more dangerous than it is helpful. I know it provided a lot of screening benefits to the residents before all those invasive exotics were removed, but in the context of preserving an intact native upland tree hammock, this to me is not part of it, except maybe at that southern corner, which doesn't warrant the inclusion of the whole 10-acre parcel.
And I want to remind the commission and the audience, and you've heard it before, but we're telling you that all of the trees that were removed as invasive and exotics were done strictly by permit under the auspices of the city consultant, so that anything that was protected still remains on that property. So at this point, we've got the questions and answers, and I asked the commission if you wanted to try to summarize these to quickly go through them. Some of them are directed directly to the commission. Some are answers that Eve and Ryan have put together in response to the people, and they've been sent back to the people who posed the questions. So we sort of asked for your direction, commission, how you'd like us to summarize this if you wish. We don't have to sit here and read each one, but we could summarize the question and the answer if that will help you.
What would be the most effective and efficient manner? Commissioner Ottman?
So, Ryan, have you met with any of the commissioners since our last meeting?
Back of all the meetings, forgive me, but I don't think so. I think that was the last, the December 8th meeting, I think was the last time we spoke with any of the commission.
Okay, so it was my understanding that this workshop here tonight was primarily for you, my colleagues. There was a few of you that had questions specifically to Ryan, and I thought you were going to meet with Ryan or speak with Ryan. There were some of you that had questions about, doing one area and not another. So there was a lot of homework to be done. So I'm hoping that the homework was done previous to this because it is so dense. But regardless of how we handle it, I do think we need to, whatever questions you need answered, we need to save the bulk of our time for discussion amongst ourselves to see if we can get to a place of yes. And if we can't, then, so be it. And that'll come out at the next meeting for the second reading. But that was my understanding of tonight's meeting, was for us primarily to be discussing and find out if there is a way to get to consensus.
Okay, Commissioner Llewellyn?
Yes, thank you, Mayor. This is a workshop, so we're not going to be able to vote on this issue tonight anyway, correct?
Correct.
So if that's the case, my understanding was this was more of an educational session for us to if we did have any additional questions, that we could ask them at this time. It was not my understanding that we were going to necessarily be asking the questions in between. But I actually, I mean, I don't know if everybody's had a chance to look through this document with all the questions and answers. I know that a lot of the questions were submitted kind of right before this meeting. And then they put together, thankfully, staff put together and legal put together responses to them. But there's a lot here. I can tell you, I personally have not had a chance to read every single question and answer. I have skimmed through and I have looked at most of them. I have some follow-up questions that I can ask. If you want to have each of us have an opportunity to ask some questions, I'm happy to start.
Yeah, go ahead.
Okay. One of the questions was actually asked by a resident, and it's the first question that you have listed on there from Ms. Cornick, about, and I don't feel like I'm getting a straight answer with this from the response that was given. And the concern is that the ordinance will prohibit house additions or property improvements near the trees. So what I'm hearing in the response is ordinance does not prohibit additions or encroachment near trees unless these trees are located in the designated buffer area within 10 feet, which sounds like, and correct me if I'm wrong, that if you live in the zone that this ordinance will apply to, that you will not be allowed to remove a tree if you want to put an addition onto your home, or if you want to do some sort of property improvement towards your property. Is that correct?
I'll let Ryan speak to the details, but the reality is we're trying to preserve the trees as much as possible. It's not that you're not allowed to, it's just that if there can be a better location for it, they're encouraged to go to that better location. Ryan, do you want to add?
Yeah, very simply speaking, the entire idea behind this portion of the ordinance related to the buffer has to do with preserving intact trees that are as far away from the usable portion of the property as possible, so the likelihood of a conflict with a property modification is as low as possible, and that those trees could be left alone as best as possible and allowed to do their job near and along the property lines, so that they were not a direct conflict with the house from an insurance standpoint, from a pool addition standpoint, from a garage addition standpoint, and all those wonderful things. There is an out clause in the ordinance, the way it's written, where if a specific portion of that buffer zone needs to be impacted or affected by some sort of property improvement, then the property owner could just move the equivalent amount of protections to another less desirable portion of the property from their standpoint, so that it gave flexibility from that standpoint. But the idea, again, was to move, or not move, but to guide tree preservation areas towards the perimeter of the property, so that those areas were as out of the way as possible. And then we would look at requested tree removals closer to the interior of the property on a case-by-case basis. So I think that's my way of summarizing the answer to that question, if that helps.
Is that what the state statute already says, or no?
If you're referring to the House bill,
I'm sorry, I can't hear you.
If you're referring to the House bill, that has nothing in it that I'm aware of that relates to this in any way, shape, or form.
The House bill is enacted at 163.045 of the Florida statutes. It just talks about no permit is needed, no mitigation, et cetera, if you are taking down a dangerous tree. A dangerous tree is not defined in the statute, nor is in residential property, nor is residential property defined.
Okay, so this one is basically just making it more, my concern is this. My concern is that if we're putting this ordinance in there, are we going to be in the same situation that we've been in other areas of law where we have wanted to do certain things, but the state preempts us. So are we going to be in the same situation if you enact something like this, where suddenly we're going ahead and we're saying you can't do this unless you get certain approvals based upon what the city says, and then have somebody file a lawsuit saying, but the state law says that we can't?
We are not interfering with the state law as it relates to a dangerous tree. So what you're talking about for extensions or expansions of your structure or a new structure, that is a different issue. You would be wanting to take down a tree under the landscaping code, and these are the provisions relating to that.
Okay. And we already have those provisions in place, don't we?
This gives additional clarification to staff for this area and safeguards.
And the additional clarifications.
The 10-foot buffer, for example, that Ryan was talking about.
Mm-hmm. So you're talking about then clarifying that although there might necessarily be a healthy tree that needs to be removed, but it won't necessarily be removed. It might be removed from one location and moved to a different location.
No, we wouldn't be looking at many relocations of any trees in this.
We can
area.
barely hear you, Ryan.
Yeah.
I don't know what's going on with my audio. I apologize.
I know I had to connect from my phone because the audio from the computer doesn't seem to be sufficient.
And just so you know, I realize that some of this is getting mixed up, but it's just there's a bunch of different issues here, and we need to be very careful, okay? Because we've had a problem in the past where the state has a tendency. We know the state is not a big fan of home rule. We know that we are a big fan of home rule, and we want to be able to create our laws. I don't want to step on something though and create lawsuits for the city. The other thing I don't want to do is I also don't want to infringe on individual property rights. If we have individuals who buy a home, I understand that there are people that have lived in this neighborhood for a long time, and I understand that they love the trees. I love the trees. I go over to that neighborhood. I have friends in that neighborhood. They're beautiful trees. But you do have people that are buying properties and who have recently bought properties over there, and now they're being told that they may not be able to do certain things that they planned to do when they bought the property. So we need to balance this and make sure that we're not infringing upon individual rights. I mean, we all, if you buy a piece of property, you do have the right essentially to do what you want with it within reason. So
if I can, I think the difference here is what you're talking about is everybody has a right in a single family home to build a single family home. That is not being hindered. Nor is it that you get your dream home necessarily. What is being protected are the trees, though, to try and preserve as many of the trees within the boundaries of your property. And if not, then you do the replacement of the trees under the landscape code.
I have a question that kind of goes in hand with what Commissioner Llewellyn was saying. So if a property owner wants to add an addition and they have to remove a tree and there is no other space to put that tree, what happens?
Ryan, do you want to address?
Yeah, can you guys hear me right now? I think it's because my laptop fan has turned on. Can you hear me? Okay,
Yeah.
in that situation, that's a perfect situation where we would indulge in the tree trust fund. When there is not a suitable place for replacement vegetation, if replacements are required, the tree trust fund is used.
And how much would that be so if I bought a property, as Commissioner Llewellyn is saying, if I bought a property and I wanted to have a certain build out, and within that build out, it didn't afford to have the amount of canopy tree cover that it would be required with the ordinance to be replanted back, how much money would I have to pay into the tree fund? Is it expensive?
It totally depends on the amount of replacement vegetation that's needed for the property. There's a sliding, I don't want to say sliding scale because that implies subjectivity, but there is a a balancing that has to happen with respect to the evaluations under our code for site planning that deal with feasibility and what's feasible with respect to avoidance and minimization and or necessary from a development standpoint. And that is something that the tree code has always had to navigate, the tree preservation code and the landscape code. But ultimately, whatever the vegetation requirement might be for a property from a mitigation standpoint, any deficit would just be calculated out based on the square footage and the approximate replacement tree cost and the installation multiplier, and that math would give you the amount that needs to go in the tree trust fund. In a typical situation, you're usually talking between $500 and $2,000 depending on what it is.
But Ryan, the homeowner could as well install new trees rather than paying into the fund.
Yes, absolutely. And the wrinkle here that I don't want to get lost is one of the key pieces of the ordinance is the minimum landscape standards. So the minimum landscape standard, if someone is starting from scratch and installing stuff on the property, they're not going to run into a tree trust fund situation because they're still required to provide 6 trees. Sorry, 6 trees. I don't know what that is. Is the audio garbled?
I can hear it.
It seems everyone is garbled right now.
Yeah.
I can't hear the mayor.
Can't hear it. We can't hear you at all.
Oh, so from what I understand, am I bubbling too?
No.
No, everybody's bubbling.
Yes, you're bubbling.
Everybody is. Try it again. Nope.
Oh. I'm not sure what's going on with the audio, but can you guys make out what I'm saying?
I
Yes,
guess.
you sound fine.
Okay.
I can hear you.
So we'll keep going. So, Ryan, are you saying that if I purchase a property over there, I would have to have 6 trees on the property anyway without the ordinance being enacted?
No.
Can't hear you. You're muted. We can't hear you.
Yeah, phone. You need to use a phone.
Okay, he's gonna call on the phone. Okay. Eve, do you know the answer to that?
It is my understanding that the 6 trees is under the new ordinance. I believe it's 3 under the old ordinance.
Okay.
Can I finish my other question?
Yeah, sorry, go ahead.
Because I didn't actually get an answer to my question, which was, might there actually be a scenario where somebody wants to do some sort of property improvement and they know because they cannot move a particular tree?
No, that is not our intent, and that's not how the ordinance is written.
Okay. So that's never going to happen. I just, I know it's hard to say never and always. I get it, but I'm concerned about that.
That is not the intent of the ordinance.
Okay. If anybody else wants to ask questions, I have others, but I'm coming back to them.
Does anyone else have questions on the commission? No one. So everyone is
I do,
okay to
Mayor.
vote on this?
Mayor, I
Okay,
did.
go ahead,
Sorry,
Vice Mayor.
I have not been able to meet with Ryan. I have taken some time out this last week driving around. And, the area that's in question is a beautiful area that does have a great overlay. There's also streets close by, around the block, and in other parts of the city that I drove around as well. And I saw quite a bit of overlay that would be considered as important as this particular spot. The questions that some of the things that I'm not, even though there's questions and answers that are coming up on there, and the certain things that people bring up about the rain and about the wind and about the ecological effect that it has, I think the approach that we're taking as a city is that you're going against the state ordinance, and this should have been they should have gone to the state and tried to change the legislation instead of us going in there and trying to manipulate a landscape ordinance that I think is not correct. Then you take and you want to lay out 2 or 3 or 4 streets, which I feel is a little bit, I guess I would say, partial to the residents there because of that overlay, where I have spoken to other people not far from there saying, well, what's wrong with my street? Well, why aren't you going to do this with my street? If you're going to do this ordinance. I've got, I didn't want to get into the presentations tonight. I've driven around not only Dania Beach, I've driven through Wilton Manors and some other areas of the county, and taken great pictures of overlays that are there that when I hear the word that this is the only overlay that we have left, I don't agree with that. Listen, I don't want trees cut down either, to benefit someone to wipe out a whole lot of trees. But after speaking, and you can correct me if I'm wrong, but when I sat there in the meeting that we had before our commission meeting, I was under the impression that the city ordinance is pretty clear. The state ordinance is pretty clear. That if somebody wanted to manipulate the ordinance that's trying to be put into play right now, that if they wanted to tear down a tree, they could just go up and put more landscape in there to compensate that in the fund, the trust fund, or the tree fund. And I think your Commissioner Llewellyn is kind of right, and I believe the mayor may even say the same thing. You're opening up opportunity for lawsuits and over state rule on this particular thing. I see you shaking your head, Ryan. Give me a break. I'm sorry, listen not to me. But if it's something I'm saying wrong, I'll let you correct me on it. But I drove over there and I saw trees that looked bad, that had dead branches on them, that had the moss growing on them and stuff like that, and some of them didn't look as healthy. And I saw the overlay. But you know what? It's I'm not trying to define me as being an arborist, because I'm not. I can just tell you that looking around, there's a lot of stuff going out there, and for us to individualize a certain area, I think is wrong. It's either we go and change the ordinance for the whole city, and then allow the whole city to participate, and then bring the state in and give their piece and do it the right way, instead of just doing this in a roundabout way, because I'm very uncomfortable doing this in a roundabout way. That's all, man.
Thank you. Commissioner Ahmed? Can't hear you. Okay.
Sorry. Can you answer the question of, are we opening ourselves up to an increased number of lawsuits with this ordinance if it was passed?
So, Tom, I'll let you jump in if you'd like, but the answer shortly is the state law is not very clear. It's contrary to our code, which is very clear on what it cannot do, what is mitigation, what are the landscape requirements, etc. Can you hear me well, or fuzzy?
Yeah, we're just here over the garden that we're all experiencing.
Okay. Now, this law doesn't define anything. It doesn't define residential. It doesn't define dangerous. It doesn't define any of the parameters for the application of the ordinance, the statute, excuse me. So I do not believe that there is a direct conflict with state law, because state law says if it's dangerous and come down, and nobody disagrees with that concept. I mean, our arborists agree with that concept. If a tree is truly dangerous and it's a dead tree, it should come down. So there's no direct conflict. What we are trying to do, though, is preserve this area and as much of the canopy that is possible while leaving a residential community that can be built. So that's the choice you make on whether parameters there, and I always say you can shoot over anything.
Thank you, Eve. Is Ryan back on audio, semi-working audio?
Ryan, if you're there, you need to take yourself off mute.
What was the question?
I didn't ask my question yet. I asked if Ryan was back on audio. Perhaps he then, this is terrible.
I know. Ryan, can you hear us? I mean, can you speak?
I didn't ask my question yet. Is he back?
I know. I see him on, and I unmuted him, but
Okay.
hold on. Someone is waiting to call in.
If Ryan can't answer, perhaps you can, Eve.
I'm sorry, just one thing. Can we ask Monica if we all signed off and signed back in? Would that help?
Just sent her a text, that's the same question.
Because I got a text message from somebody watching the meeting that they can't understand it. It's really bad. Is it still bad?
Let's just stop the meeting and then come back. Can we do that?
What was the question? What did you say, Monica?
Let's stop the meeting. Let's leave the meeting and see if we can come back.
The same link?
Can we do that?
All right, let's.
The same link, Monica?
Yes.
Okay, so everyone
Everybody.
on the meeting, leave and come back.
Right.
Hello, can you hear me?
Yes, I can hear you.
The noise seems not to be there.
Right, the noise is not here right now.
Okay, let's see. Thank you.
You're welcome, Monica.
The noise is not there. Can you try to talk?
I know.
Can we hear each other yet?
Yep, we're slowly coming back.
Okay.
Without the headache.
It seems to be okay now for some reason. Ring Central went banana.
Okay, Ryan, are you there yet?
I don't see Ryan yet.
He texted me and I told him to get off the meeting and try and get back in. So he should be coming back on any moment.
Okay.
Okay, we're still waiting on Vice Mayor, and I don't see Commissioner Ottman. I see Ryan. But Commissioner Ottman and Vice Mayor, we're still waiting on them.
The sound is so much better.
Ryan, try your audio, please. You're muted.
Hold on, let's go to Ryan.
Ryan,
we
are
can't
you
hear you.
not speaking?
No, we can't hear you.
You're gonna call in?
Calling her. Okay.
Ryan, if you're calling in, you may have to give us your phone number so that it can be recognized so that you can be heard.
Well, if he clicks on the microphone, the little arrow, there is an option for him to switch to phone audio, and then it will give him a participant code, and it will just link him as himself, and it won't have him up twice.
Good to know. Ryan, did you understand that? Good. He's going to try and do that, I think, but I have his number if you need it.
Yeah, it'll give you a list of phone numbers. You can dial any one of those, and at the bottom of that list, it'll give you the meeting ID along with your participant code. Can someone check on the vice mayor? Because I haven't seen him come back on. Oh wait, I see him now.
Can you hear me now?
Yes.
All right. Sorry about all that. Everything went wrong all at the exact same time. My daughter walked in, and then my fan audio on my laptop went. It was just, I apologize.
No, you're fine.
All good.
Okay, Commissioner Ottman.
Okay, no worries. So Ryan, I've heard the question or the idea scuttled around a few times. Why this area versus wouldn't it make more sense to do an ordinance for the entire city? Can you speak to that?
Yeah, there's not enough resources throughout most of the rest of the city to warrant something like this. This is a above and beyond ordinance that usually would only be attempted in an area where there's a significantly different environmental character to warrant it. With all the research we've done, we've seen it done for erosion protection areas nationwide and slope protections and historic tree protections and different things, but it has to be a significant natural or environmental resource to warrant this. You would not want to slap an overlay over the entire city. Otherwise, you're better off just modifying Section 825 of our code, which is the tree preservation code in the first place, or the landscape code, accordingly, if you want it to reach the entirety of the city. That was not the intent here. The intent was strictly to recognize how different, special this particular area was and do something to preserve its integrity in the simplest sense possible.
Thank you, Ryan. Beyond that, can you speculate on if this ordinance does not pass and we continue with our what we have, what that area will look like? Like what can we expect the difference will be if it's not passed?
Well, that'll entirely depend probably on lot turnover over time. It depends how many people move away or the estates get transferred or anything like that. And then when that happens, that opens the door to a much more likely probability of a redevelopment or a severe site modification. But that's specifically why the buffering code criteria was put in there. Because if we can preserve the stuff around the perimeter of the property and allow everybody to do what they want in the interior of the property, which is really fairly standard approach, we're just formalizing it a little bit by adding some dimensions and some other criteria, that allows enough of the existing vegetation to remain to maintain the integrity of the system. And that was the idea behind it, to not overly burden the existing residents with, hey, you can't remove this 8-inch tree that's right where your pool is, just because it's a native tree. Now, if they have a 52-inch, specimen that's the oldest thing in the entire lot, the city's not going to want to say, yes, go ahead and remove that. But separate from that sort of outlier scenario, the trees around the perimeters of the property by themselves can provide enough canopy coverage to maintain the integrity of the Hammock system and still allow people to develop the interiors of their properties.
Okay.
That's the simplest way of looking at it.
That answers my question. Thank you very much. You're muted, Mayor.
Awesome. Are there any other questions from the commission? Go ahead.
All right, and this might be for Eve or Tom, or maybe not. I'm not sure. With the current, with this ordinance, how are we going to deal with enforcement of it? Do we know, or is that something that I need to ask?
For enforcement, it comes through code compliance if they see the improper tearing down of trees. But ordinarily, when somebody would be coming in for a permit, It would go through community development like any other application. And as part of that application, it would be reviewed by Ryan and his company as to the landscaping requirements.
Okay, how is that any different from what we're doing now with our current tree ordinance?
It's not any different.
Okay, so because from what I've seen from this whole process, and correct me if I'm wrong, but it seems as though the concern is that there are some people that perhaps were taking down trees either without getting permits or without getting the proper evaluation of the tree before they were doing the removals. And there's been some concern that the rules are not being followed. So I'm just trying to understand again, and you know, I feel like because we've been talking about this for so long, and it seems like every meeting for the last 6 months this has come up. Some meetings longer than others. I feel like it's getting, I'm maybe getting too wrapped up in my head with it. So I want to make sure that I'm clear on it. I'm just not understanding how this law, putting this into law, is going to change anything, except that
Bad behavior, I'll put it this way, bad behavior may never change. So if there's a bad will, meaning you're going to just take down all your trees regardless of the quality of the tree, this will not prevent that. You'll have your enforcement action and by the city, and that process will go forward. If you are a normal homeowner and you want to do an improvement, this would just be part of the process, the normal process of getting your site plan and just ensuring. Really, it's like a little bit more enhanced review to make sure that we're preserving the trees. That's really what it is. But to prevent bad actors, there's really not much we can do because of the state law. And that's why I said we're not in direct contravention of the state law, because nothing in here is preventing the bad actor from doing exactly what it wants.
Right. And that was my thought initially on this. I think when we had there was that meeting that we had with each of us individually before the last meeting. And
This
I think
does not prevent that.
Right.
And we cannot prevent that.
Right. It's just an enforcement issue at this point. I mean, it's, you know, we're putting something out there, but you still have to enforce.
And it's much with the state law, it's very hard to enforce overall because the state law just doesn't define a lot of things.
Right. And I know that's a very poorly written bill and a very poorly written state law. And it's not clear. And unfortunately, we've had a lot of those in this state and other states, but it seems like we get a lot of those knee-jerk reaction sort of laws that get thrown together and they don't really give the definitions that they need to give. I'm just a little concerned that it could be used, this particular law could be used to overreach. There's clearly some tensions, in that neighborhood as it is, as I'm sure everybody has seen with the emails that are coming in. There seems to be some personal attacks that are going back and forth now amongst the neighbors against us. And I don't want to create more of that by forcing this further in either direction. So, I mean,
that's your policy decision for you all to make. I consider this ordinance much like a preservation ordinance, like a historic preservation ordinance. The designation preserves the old buildings. Some people don't like it saying, you know, by property rights, you're interfering with them, but ultimately you're preserving an area. And that's sort of the concept of this. But again, we can't stop the bad actors. And ultimately it's a policy decision for you all in which way you'd like to go.
Okay, thank you.
Mm-hmm.
Any other members of the commission have any other questions, or are we all comfortable enough with the information that we have to be able to vote on it when it comes back to the commission?
I don't have any other questions. I do have I have a question procedural wise,
Okay.
which is, as you saw from the last meeting, there were lots of people that were coming up that wanted to speak. And when we vote on this, obviously, the same thing is going to happen again. And I understand this is an important issue, but we have a lot of important issues, and we've already had to push back some things in the past. We don't want to have to do that again. I'd like to know if there is a way that we could limit the citizens' comments so that we can actually, I think we've all heard everything at this point. I mean, and I understand people have a right to speak, but they've spoken more than a few times in some cases. And I don't know if there's a way that we can either limit that, either, say, each side gets so many minutes and that's it, or if we need to have a separate special meeting that's just for this issue so that we can vote on it.
I'll let Tom address that as the city attorney, but other cities have done it. So I've done it in the past myself. So you can set a time limit
Well,
for 30 minutes. But I'll let Tom
Let me
speak.
say something first. I feel everyone's pain. We were all on that same meeting, and I definitely want this placed on the agenda as the last item under the public hearings. That's number one. And then number two, because we've heard mostly every side of every person, I would like to limit everyone's comments to 1.5 minutes. That way, we still are hearing from people, and then no one else can give anyone else any time just for this, because we've heard, hours, we've given everyone the opportunity to speak with all of us, and we were respectful enough to listen to every single person that had anything to say during the first meeting. And I think that it would be a disservice to the entire meeting, and we will lose people that want to be a part of our commission meetings if that happens again with the same exact topic. So my plan was to limit that, and that's for everyone that's on this call listening, to limit each comment to 1.5 minutes, and you cannot give any of your time to anyone else. And and that's just that, and that's my opinion. I'm not sure how you all feel about that.
Again, I'm going to follow up on that, Mayor. My recommendation would be that nobody can give their time for somebody else to use that they didn't use. So I'm going to follow up on that. I would suggest that we stick with the 3-minute rule because we've used it for years. To shorten it would be, it could be problematic. It's very hard to speak in 90 seconds. It's very tough to speak in 3 minutes. But the 3-minute rule has been used consistently for public speaking for about 20 years, and I would suggest we stick with that. Ms. Llewellyn's idea of doing a separate meeting may well be the way to do it, and cap it at not to exceed 2 hours or whatever it is. Everybody has really heard this. Everybody has had a say, but they're not done saying until the second reading of the ordinance, which is later this month. So I'd recommend whether you tell us to put it on a special meeting, 2-hour meeting after work, like 6 o'clock, we can do that, or put it at the end of the next meeting. But I would recommend sticking with 3 minutes and no bar.
Tom, are there any implications? Because I've been to other meetings and even school board meetings where when they've had a contentious item such as this, they just for that one topic or item of discussion, they have shortened the amount of time, but not for every other topic and item and meeting, just because they had a large amount of people speaking. Are there any legal implications for doing that?
Other than the fact that we have been giving and according 3 minutes to everybody for many years. That's the issue I've got. So to shorten it, I'm not sure that would be attacked in court, but it could be. I'd rather just not run a risk with that, as advice to you all, and just stick with 3 minutes, but you can put a cap on the time of the meeting. Again, all the people have been heard. It's hard to say something new, but they should be given at least the time they're usually given as a citizen to address that. That's my recommendation. Go to 1.5 minutes.
Is there an opportunity to put a hard stop on an item? Because I've also seen that done other places as well.
Yes, that's what I'm recommending, that you could say the meeting is going to be over, this particular special meeting or whatever will not
No,
exceed.
I'm talking about within the meeting.
I'm not sure I understand the question.
So I've gone to school board meetings, and they have certain items that can only go for a certain amount of time, and it's a hard stop on those items within the meeting itself. So they might say, item number 8.3-B is an item, and we're not discussing this for longer than 30 minutes. And it's a hard stop on that. Is that that a possibility or no?
Yeah, I think you can do that, but I think you'd have to allow sufficient time, knowing the numbers of people that we've got here. Probably about 30 who wish to speak. A lot of people last time didn't speak. They gave their time to somebody else. So if we tell the people, because they're listening, that people, we don't need to hear it again. The commission has heard what you have to say. You want to summarize, that's fine, so people know where you are, but we're not going to exceed 3 hours or 2 hours. Yes, I think you can do that.
Well,
That's especially in light of the fact that we've had, this has gone to planning and zoning. It's had 3 special meetings of the commission at workshops. And now this is, I think, the 4th one. It's been adequately vented, but they should still have an option before the second reading, before this comes to law or doesn't become a law, to have that last chance to speak to you as their electeds.
Mayor James,
Okay.
Mayor James, City Clerk Schneider here.
Hi, Tom.
In your policy on your agendas under citizen comments, it states if more than 10 speakers express a desire to speak, the commission shall determine on a meeting by meeting basis whether to A, extend the time allotted for citizen comments to accommodate all speakers, or B, whether to limit the number of speakers or amount of time per speaker. A speaker's time shall not be transferable to another speaker. That's all.
So then we can do the whole thing with a minute and a half. I mean, only because we've heard everyone from on more than one meeting and more than one occasion. And I just think I don't want to have another separate meeting for this item. I think that all of the commissioners and our vice mayor, we've expressed all the questions that we have. We're discussing it now. It's been an hour now. You know, we're comfortable. We're going to be making the decision, yes or no. We've heard from a number of the residents on a number of occasions. I've been out there on a number of occasions. So have a lot of you. And I just, you know, if it's ethical and legal, I would want to allow a minute and a half for each speaker. And I know that they might not be able to get the entire email or presentation that they have, but we've already heard what we know, either they're for it or against it. And at that point, you know, I don't know how much more swaying at the last minute that one could do. And so, especially if we have more than 10, I would like to exercise that right.
Well, I think we can anticipate more than 10. If you wish to keep it to a minute and a half, that can be done. The risk is fairly low as to having a court substitute his or her judgment for your judgment, especially in light of all the opportunity people have had to speak on this issue to you as the commission. So in light of that, I think you can probably do that if you want to limit that time. But again, I would not allow for the transfer of time.
Sure. Commissioner Llewellyn?
Or again, I mean, the other option, again, couldn't we just do a special meeting just on this one item and just keep it at a 2-hour meeting like we've got today, just specifically for the purpose of giving the citizens an opportunity to comment and then voting on it? I mean, I think we've all talked this thing to death. It's a matter of allowing people an opportunity to speak on it one more time. And if that's what we're going to do, then, I mean, this way it doesn't interfere with the rest of the business of the city. I just don't want this to end up taking over and we don't get any other business done in the city. That's my concern.
Well, yeah, that's why I said that I wanted to make sure it was the last item under public hearing. Sorry, I couldn't think of that. Public hearing. I'm not in favor of having a separate meeting. I'm not sure of the rest of you all. I know we have so many meetings and we continue to have so many meetings. I'm not in favor of having another meeting regarding this when we don't have any other questions regarding it. And we're going to hear a lot of the same, you know, comments that we've heard 2, 3, 4, 5, 6 times. And so I guess I'll ask by a raise of hands, who wants to have a special meeting? The 2 options are having a special meeting or limiting the time to a minute and a half. So raise your hand if you're in favor of having, on the little thing, raise your hand if you're in favor of having another special meeting. You have 1. I think that's it. So we'll just limit the time to a minute and a half at the next commission meeting. And Tom Schneider, if you could please put this as the last item under public hearing, so we can make sure that every other project is heard and doesn't have to be delayed or
Yes, Mayor, I
put
will.
through to the next meeting. All right?
Yep.
Okay, if there's no other comment, I see one hand raised. This is not going to be an open question and answer session. If we have not answered a question, that is the only opportunity that we are giving here. If we have already answered your question, and you're asking a duplicate question, I know that Eve or Tom or Ryan can say, like you said, it was already answered, and then we can move on just to be fair to the people who have taken their time out to be with us tonight. So, Michelle, you are unmuted. Is there a question that we have not answered?
Well, with all due respect, I don't believe it's been answered. Can you hear me okay?
Yes, ma'am.
Okay. My question is really, I guess, directed at Ryan, but also towards the commission, because I did send pictures much earlier. But Ryan said that, this whole development, the whole ordinance, is specifically for targeted, not at the residents, but really for redevelopment and site modification. Now, we know that the FPL property, that is under consideration for that specific thing. And really, the people who oppose this, who are for it, against it, all are questioning why that property was taken out. Now, I know you're saying that the FPL, because there's an easement on it, but that's not at issue. FPL, we all understand they can do as they please. Now, we also, all the vegetation was taken out, and I showed you pictures. You admit that there's still at least 20 or more healthy specimens, oak tree specimens on that property. Whether it's to the front, north, south, it's irrelevant. Why not preserve those? It seems odd that it keeps coming up that, oh, they did everything legally. Obviously, there's something going on in the background that we all don't know about, that we'd like to understand why that specific property is.
Could you elaborate on what that really means? That is something going on in the background?
Yeah, I would like to understand, because the answers that we're getting are not satisfactory. The fact that there's an FPL easement on it, we all understand that FPL can do as they please on that property, but that doesn't preclude, that doesn't make any sense to throw the baby out with the bathwater. You still have 20 intact oak trees on that property, and they're all in one area. That is the site that I'm told is going to be redeveloped. So it makes absolutely no sense that this whole ordinance is for the purpose of specifically stopping redevelopment from getting rid of these trees, and yet you have 20 healthy intact oak trees that you're willing to not include in the ordinance. It's not adding up to anyone. So that's what I'm getting at. And Ryan, my specific question, I guess, for Ryan is, he, I think, was well aware that it was added, when in fact, if you look at the original petition, it had a lot to do with that specific property. So it was the fact that it wasn't included in the beginning, that was an oversight. Then it was included, which is understood why it was included. But the fact that it was taken away very last minute of a one meeting, and there hasn't been any discussion about it, other than what we're being told, that there's an FPL easement. So, we understand that that's not at issue. The fact that there's vegetation that was removed, that's not at issue. That was done. What's done is done. But we still have opportunity to preserve some trees. It is still a really significant number of trees intact. Why not include those?
Okay, let's let Ryan answer the question.
I think we can make it short, because we've already answered the question a couple of times, including at the beginning of this meeting. The short answer is the 20 trees are surrounding the home in one portion. The rest of the property really is not worth including within the district. And if you all decide to change your minds and want to include it, that is your prerogative as a city commission to increase the boundaries.
But it's not an answer to say it's not worth, why isn't it worth including? There's a significant amount of trees in a certain area. We understand FPL.
That's the opinion of that is the opinion. We're not going to argue with you about it. That is the opinion.
Okay. But that's, I appreciate you listening, and I think everyone can hear where I'm coming from. And I think you will see that the residents on both sides who support this and are against it feel that that property should be included. So thank you for your time. I appreciate it.
Thank you, Michelle.
We can't hear you, Mayor.
Sean, is there a question that has not been answered?
Of the questions that were submitted by the various residents, some were directed to the commission. Many were directed so that the staff could answer them and have done so. So there are a few remaining that were sent in by the citizens that asked you as a body questions. If you wish to go through those now, you can, or you could defer that to the next meeting. For those people who submitted those questions to you, that was invited to do that. There's about 3 or 4 people that ask questions like that.
Those questions are all relating to policy and whether you want to do the district or not, whether you should expand the district or not. And those are the big questions that I think go with the final reading of the ordinance or the reading of the ordinance and your direction on what to do with it.
Okay, all questions that were directed to us, I think that we will answer those questions within our discussion when this topic comes up.
Yes.
I guess I'm asking the Sean, who has his hand raised, if there is a question that has not been answered so far.
Yes.
So go ahead, Sean.
Yes, there's 2 questions. Number one, they were spoken about unethical arborists that aren't following whatever's being done. However, my question is, let's say, for example, we hire an arborist who is, as far as we're understanding, certified, everything's good on our point, and then the city decides to contest whatever he says before, after, during, no matter when it happens. Actually, just one point on that one is, if the tree gets cut down and we got the arborist who said it was bad and we did what we're supposed to do, at least by law, the city decides or rules that it was incorrect, are we now going to be penalized for whatever happened? Meaning there are different items that penalizes people for cutting down, or residents for cutting down what is considered to be healthy trees, including $5,000 fine, triple to the tree trust fund, and I believe there was one other which I can't recall off the top of my head. How exactly does that affect residents when we did things we're supposed to do, including the fact we did follow the rules and had a tree on our property, got rid of what we thought would be, or what is considered to be, based on the reports we got, to be dead, and now having to pay to plant 6 new trees to replace it?
I think you're talking about a pending case, so we will not be discussing that, but it's very clear.
I'm not.
It is very clear from the code that, yes, if a tree isn't taken down improperly, the city has the right for enforcement. And I think you set the criteria out yourself, so I think you're clear on the answer.
No, I'm
as
actually
far
not.
as the arborist, the answer was placed in the questions. You resubmitted, and we did submit the answers to those questions.
I'm sorry, ma'am, but I must disagree with that. My question is, are we getting penalized for that decision when we follow the rules? That was not a question that was asked, nor was it answered.
The answer is we follow the code. So if there is a code violation, there would be a notice of violation.
To us as a resident?
Correct.
So basically what you're saying is you're going against state law because we follow the rules on state law, and you're deciding that whatever we did is not correct. So we're getting penalized for that.
I'm not going to argue with you. That's an opinion.
No, we're not going to argue.
Okay.
We will point out.
Okay, hold on.
We will point out that everybody, if they are cited for something, will have due process under constitutional law, notice and an opportunity to be heard. So if someone's ever cited for doing something allegedly wrong, in the city's opinion, there'll be a hearing. If they disagree with it, they appeal it to court. There's nothing that the city can do can preclude people from having the notice, having legal counsel if they want it, they don't need it. And then if they disagree, going to circuit court in Broward County and appealing the decision. They'll never be rammed down their throat It'll be a matter of evidence.
Understood, but at that point, we now have to hire an attorney to fight the
No, you
city
don't.
limits.
You choose to hire an attorney on your own. If you
That's my
hired-
point.
If you hired an arborist who was unscrupulous, that's a risk we all take. If you hire a lawyer who's unscrupulous, that's a risk you take. If you hire a doctor who's unscrupulous, that's a risk you take. So that's what's going to happen.
I beg your, begging your
We're not
pardon,
going to
sir.
argue the case because.
I'm not arguing. I'm asking a question, sir. We
the
follow
question
the
is-
rules.
Okay, Sean, okay, we're gonna move on.
Fine. Thank you
because
on that.
they-
May I ask the
Our
other question?
attorneys have given their legal opinion. And I'm not gonna open this up so people could think that
Fine.
this is going to be a back and forth issue. They've answered the question to the best of their ability. And, I don't know what else to really respond
fine.
and to say. with
Moving
that.
on. My second question, if I may. At beginning or on one of the earlier meetings we had, it was mentioned that there was a grandfather clause, which would not affect us. And based on what I'm hearing today from what Ryan said as part of his presentation, it would affect us if we don't meet the standards moving forward. Meaning if we did not meet the standards, we didn't have the trees in the property that meet the current guidelines, and we extend our property, the past understanding was we'd be grandfathered in. However, if we're not meeting that, we're being told now, or based on what's being said, we will now have to plant those additional trees to meet the standards for any additions or any type of work being done to the home itself. To me, that sounds like that's not a grandfather clause. Am I incorrect or correct on that? Because I'm confused on that.
Go ahead, Ryan. You're muted. Hold on. You're muted. Okay, try now. No? You have to unmute your phone. Okay, go ahead.
Can you hear me now?
Yes.
I'm no longer a Verizon commercial. Sean, the simple answer is that there is no way the city is going to try and chase existing residents for a site that currently doesn't have the same amount of vegetation as the rest of the properties in the overlay area. That's the very simple answer. The city is not going to chase anybody in that scenario.
I'm sorry, that wasn't the
Thank
question.
you, Sean. Igal, is there a question that has not been answered by us tonight?
It's more of a question for.
What did I do wrong?
Igal, we can barely hear you.
All the volume's up.
That's not from me. That's from someone else.
Their mouths are all moving.
Oh. Okay. Bonnie, I need to mute Bonnie. Igal, go ahead.
That's not from my side. I hear that as well.
Igal?
Can you hear me?
Yes.
Okay. I was just for the meeting next in the next couple of weeks, whenever that's going to be, if we could just request that whoever participates is actually one of those people that are affected in those 3 blocks, or at the very least, they live in Dania Beach, so they could be part of the conversation. I mean, in the previous meeting, we've had multiple people that don't even live in the area that called in to give their opinion, even though it doesn't really affect them.
I don't think that's anything that we can limit. There are public meetings, and whoever wants to come to a public meeting and give their opinion can do so. That's up to the commission to decide the value of those comments based upon where those residents live.
Exactly
Tom,
correct.
am I correct?
You are correct, and I think only 3 or maybe 4 maximum people spoke who did not live in the area, in the city. So it wasn't something that hurt the ability of the commission to decide this matter.
Okay.
Anybody in the public has the opportunity to speak.
Okay, thank you.
Thank you. All right, I don't see any other hands up, and so I thank you all for joining us. Does any of the other staff or commission have any other final comments or thoughts? No, we're all ready.
Okay,
all right.
This is set for second reading, Mayor, on January 26th, 7 p.m. Virtual commission meeting.
Absolutely. So you all heard that. I wish you all a very safe new year and continue to be safe with the pandemic and everything around you. And God bless you and your families. And I'll see you all at the next commission meeting. The meeting is adjourned.